Hello, everyone. This is BRG, and it is Pride Month. A bunch of reactionaries on my Twitter have reacted to Pride Month by saying that pride is a sin. And I would just like to point out that if you are so opposed to the joy and existence of other people, and you claim yourself to be a Christian or whatever religion that you engage in, you're kind of committing another type of sin, and even more grievous sin. You're engaging in over righteousness. And I have no problem with religious people on the left, okay? But when you start acting like the basest and most bashy and reactionary of Jehovah's Witnesses, then that kind of is a problem because you're not engaging with the movement, with the struggle for liberation of all human beings from a principled level. You're basically engaging from a reactionary level. You are working to hurt people, and you are working to give moral and, in many cases, practical support to reactionaries who want to commit genocide. So think about it a little bit. Of course, reactionaries rarely think about the things they do and say. Some may. Some may come back to the light. So it's Pride Month. How did Pride start? Pride, as we always say, was a riot. It was a rebellion. Pride is queer. Pride is anti-capitalist. Pride is homeless. Pride does not belong to Lockheed Martin. Pride does not belong to Boeing. Pride does not belong to Anheuser-Busch InBev. Pride belongs to the people. The vanguard, the leading role in the 1969 Stonewall Rebellion, belonged to Black, Puerto Rican, trans people, drag performers, the cast out, the most oppressed within the queer community. And it's important when we go through Pride Month. Of course, I'm proud 365 days a year, 24/7. But when we are going through this month, it's important to remember how it started, who it was started by, and the legacy we have to uphold. So, how are companies reacting to and engaging this Pride Month? Certain people, certain very stupid people, say that pride is inherently imperialist or pride is corporate. This shows a lack of knowledge about our history. This shows a willful disengagement from the revolutionary segments and strata of our community. And what reactionaries or bad actors always do is they pick out the smallest, most loudest part and they blow it up to represent the whole. Let's take a look at what our friendly corporations are doing for us this now that they are sort of forced to admit that queer people exist because they want our money.
June is Pride Month, and there's no missing its kickoff. Rainbow flags are everywhere. There are t-shirts and hats. Apple has a watch. Absolute Vodka has a special bottle.
Companies have got more involved in Pride as a sign of how the whole culture is changing.
But this year, the landscape...
Okay, so the good professor from Columbia is wrong. Companies are not getting involved in Pride because they recognize that society is changing. Companies are getting involved in Pride because they realize that queer people are a very, very large market. Juneteenth is also this month. It recently became a federal holiday. So now you're going to see the Pan African flag, the black, red, and green, on display in your local supermarket, in your fucking local brewery. Like, everybody is going to try to cater to black people for that 1 week that holds Juneteenth. Pride is the same. Sorry about that. Now back to the video.
Has shifted.
You are going to get rainbow vomit on everything.
That's Ben Shapiro. That fellow is insufferable. He is a fairly known American reactionary. I can't stand his voice. I can't stand his appearance. I believe this guy is almost 40 years old, and he looks like he's fucking 12. And I have never heard a single intelligent thing come out of this man's mouth. He's talking about rainbow vomit. He should address the verbal vomit and verbal diarrhea that comes out of his mouth. The thing with a lot of these reactionaries is that, like, I think they know the things that they are saying are wrong, that they're full of shit, but they also realize that there's a very, very substantial and very, very well-heeled chunk of American society that wants to hear their biases confirmed. So they have these podcasts, they have these shows. Like, they're basically pulling the Alex Jones angle. Alex Jones sort of pioneered this whole internet reaction and bullshit genre. So now you've got Ben Shapiro and all of these other imbeciles that trying to jump in the trial and get hold of some money. That's all.
Across corporate America.
Some corporations stepping into a fierce fight over transgender issues. It plays out in state houses.
When you bow your heads in prayer, you see the blood on your hands.
And on cable news.
The same people who encourage minors to have life-altering hormones and surgery on their genitalia and even begin transitioning without parental consent, they have done and are doing enormous damage to young people.
Target moved its Pride Month merchandise, including a transgender-friendly bathing suit, to the back of some of its stores after customer backlash.
Okay, these are like naked people in shirts.
Its stock price dropped more than 15% in 2 weeks.
I got some Bud Lights for us.
Bud Light marketed a customized can featuring transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, triggering an outcry. Sales dropped nearly 30%. There are calls to boycott Kohl's because of its Pride-themed baby clothes, and North Face, the outdoor company, as well.
We like to call this little tour the Summer of Pride.
Transgender issues still seem strange and scary to people.
20 states have passed bans on transgender medical treatment for minors.
Does this very angry debate cast a shadow over some of the progress that has been made?
I think everyone is aware that issues that seemed to be settled just a few years ago are up for grabs again.
Pride organizers across the country tell NBC News Digital that their once eager sponsors are now more hesitant, growing fearful a backlash will target their bottom line. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Yeah, note that the good professor said up for grabs. First of all, rights are never, ever, ever negotiable. In theory, of course. Now, in practice, corporations care ultimately about money. So if one consumer base is larger than the other, then they're going to pander to the larger consumer base. So, like, reactionaries have quite a bit of money. That's who funds Ben Shapiro. That's who gives a lot of these people their clout. And rightists, fascists, reactionaries are not stupid. They know that America is at heart a center-right country. Okay? This country took how long to guarantee basic civil rights for black people? They know that this country is at root reactionary and center-right. And they like this fact, and they want to keep this country that way. So any mild push in a progressive direction. They lose their shit. They mauled over it because they see their way of life as being under attack. And they are not ignorant of the fact that they are attacking other people. They know exactly what they're doing. That's why I constantly encourage leftists to stop trying to appeal to these people. All this MAGA communism, all this bullshit like that, that's not working. You're not improving communism. You're making communism worse. And the title of the stream is Combating Queerphobia on the Left and in the Black Community. A lot of people do not know what the left is. So thankfully, the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, left us this very handy-dandy little spectrum that I consult a lot, and you should consult a lot as well, because it's pretty much spot on. This was made in the mid-'70s, so what is the left? You have various strains of socialism, the people's side. Okay, I know we have various disagreements on what exactly socialism is, but in general, we can recognize socialism as being the people's side. Do you want collective people's control of the means of production? Do you want the expropriation and removal of the capitalist class, the ruling class, the 1%, whatever you call it, the removal of these people's boots from off our necks? Do you want a more fair and equitable distribution of the produce of your labor? Then you're a socialist. Black people, poor people, third world peoples, socialist parties, communist parties, anarchists, and general radicals and militants. Basically, anybody that agrees that trans people are people, that their rights should not be impinged or infringed on, and are willing to defend this with their body, that's the left. So, MAGA communists, Duganite fascists, all these types of people, these people are not leftists, okay? They belong on the right side. The Democrats, the Republicans, the reactionaries. What is a reactionary? I use this word a lot. A reactionary is somebody that reacts to things, okay? They react to the mere existence of trans people. They react to trans people having basic democratic rights. They react to fucking Bud Light trying to get more queer money. Reactionaries react to things. So these MAGA communists, these imbeciles that you see rehashing Ben Shapiro's talking points on Twitter and in other spaces and making all of these horrible videos about it, those are reactionaries. Those people do not belong to the left. And thankfully, I see very few comrades engaging with these people as leftists. I see them being treated as the reactionaries they are. So, whence comes transphobia on the left? Like, why are there so many anti-trans, anti-homophobes, anti-homophobes? Why are there so many outright bad people calling themselves leftists? Because they realize that among the people, there is an increasing demand for socialism, some aspect of socialism, and they realize that they can appeal to a broader base, these reactionaries who call themselves communists or revolutionaries, by tampering with and playing with our ideology and our movement. So these people are not lost comrades, okay? These are reactionaries, fascists, who have inserted themselves and insinuated themselves into the people's struggle. They're kind of like the Boogaloo Boys. Remember them from 2020? The Hawaii shirt crew that was parading around George Floyd marchers trying to throw salt in the game? Yeah. So whenever you see a MAGA communist, think of those Hawaii shirt assholes with the ARs that just wanted to see things burn. And when you read these people's stuff, like, it's obvious that they do not care anything about the masses. They're constantly talking about westoids and leftoids and all other types of oids and ites and yeah. They have a very marked contempt and hatred of the people. And Fred Hampton taught me and taught all of us that we are willing to die for the people, okay? We're not going to die slipping on no ice. We're not going to die from an overdose of Popeye's biscuits. We're going to die in the struggle for liberation. We're going to die defending our trans comrades. We're not going to die slumped over a fucking computer. Well, I might, but I'm terminally online. I'm trying to change that. I'm not terminally. Anyways, so what is the state of the queer population, the black LGBT population in the United States? We have a handy, nifty, very shiny presentation from the UCLA Williams Institute at the School of Law. So a lot of people are under the impression that queer people are all financially well fixed. I mean, as a member of the community myself, I know that's a fucking lie. But people like data, people like statistics, people like shiny presentations. So here you go. The black LGBT adult population is younger and less likely to live in the South than the population of black non-LGBT adults. Black LGBT adults are more likely to experience economic insecurity than black non-LGBT adults. Black LGBT adults face disparities in mental and physical health, such as depression, asthma, and disability. 1.2 million black LGBT adults live in the United States. 1.2 million. That's a pretty big chunk of the black population. 36% of black LGBT adults are raising children. 56% of black queer households had a low income. 49% of black non-queer households did. So black queer people are statistically poorer than black non-queer people. 26% of black queer adults have been diagnosed with depression. 15% of black non-queer adults have a similar diagnosis. 56% of black queer adults are tested for HIV annually. 24% have never been tested for HIV. People act like HIV and AIDS or something that like disappeared in the mid to late 90s. No. AIDS is still out there. Like, people are still dying from this. It's not something from the past. Okay, yeah, we did have negligence on the part of Ronald Reagan's administration, who thought the shit was funny. But it's still happening. Like, and that myth, that misunderstanding that AIDS is something from a long time ago that was killing a lot of people in the 80s, but it's killing not as many people now. Like, no, especially if you are poor. Like, when you're poor and queer, like, you have two strikes against you in this society. And when you have strikes against you in society, you might as well just tick off all the healthcare boxes, because you're not getting shit. We do not have socialized healthcare in this country. We do not have universal healthcare in this country. If you're broke, you're fucked. But thankfully, there are a lot of clinics and places that provide free HIV testing. But getting your medicine and all of that, like, your survival rate in this country from a disease like HIV and AIDS is directly correlated to your class. If you're working class, you're going to die earlier than your counterpart who's petty bourgeoisie or bourgeoisie. 79% of black queer adults reported facing verbal insults or abuse. 60% report being threatened with violence. 62% of cisgender black LGBT adults felt connected to the LGBT community. 29% of black transgender adults felt connected to the gender minority community. So see, we're already talking about divisions of class and race. Why would a black LGBT adult feel unconnected to the queer community because, again, by and large, the queer community in the United States is dominated ideologically and politically by white petty bourgeoisie and bourgeoisie. Like when you turn on the TV and watch these stupid little shows that are consistently released, the stereotype of a queer person is a white, well-dressed, upper middle class gay man. Or if you watch BET, a black, upper middle class, well-dressed gay man. As a gay man, I realize that I'm sort of in the ruling class of the queer community, which is, it's extremely important that we study queer history and we know where we came from. Like 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was still possible to die for going to a gay bar. Like the police and fascists would literally set you up. They would set you up like they were going to take you on a date. They would take you to a secluded location and they would kill you. That shit still happens today, but like it was a thing back then. There was a thing, it was called rolling queers. Lumpen reactionary youth, they would go out and they would look for stereotypically queer men and they would lure us to a place and they would rob us. So we have to realize that that shit is not that far away. And the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Yesterday, they helped to gut what little rights unions have in this country, organized working class has in this country. And like, we cannot rely on the master's tools to take down and decimate the master's house. When you rely on your enemies, you suffer. So, is LGBTQ identity itself distracting or even imperialist? It cuts both ways, kind of. What reactionaries do is, as I said before, they take the smallest part of our community, the most vocal part, the part of our community that works for the CIA, that works for the feds, that supports Israelis, the Israeli government. Not all Israelis are bad. That supports the Israeli Zionist settler state in occupied Palestine. They take these people and they use them to represent all of us. So there is a phenomenon called pinkwashing. Wikipedia, whoever edited this article, states that pinkwashing is a strategy of promoting LGBT rights protections as evidence of liberalism and democracy, especially to distract from or legitimize violence against other countries or communities. This concept has been used by Sarah Schulman with reference to Israeli government public relations and is related to homo-nationalism, the exploitation of sexual minorities to justify racism and xenophobia. I chuckle whenever I hear homo-nationalism. Like that's just a silly term. Pinkwashing is a continuation of the civilizing mission used to justify colonialism, this time on the basis of LGBT rights in Western countries. So basically, an example of pinkwashing would be using Uganda's recent reactionary anti-queer law to justify drone strikes and bombings in this country. Never mind the fact that the reason that Uganda and Pakistan, all these other, like all of these former British colonies support and have these laws in the first place is because these anti-LGBTQ laws in these countries are either Western colonial laws that carried over into the so-called independence, which is really the neo-colonial era. Or you have missionaries that insinuate themselves into these countries. They get a shitload of prestige and clout in the government, and they force through these reactionary laws. Like, people think that black people are inherently transphobic or inherently, like, first of all, nobody is inherently anything, okay? That's an anti-dialectical proposition. People are as their material conditions have made them, and people are as they have been brainwashed. If you are a missionary, you set up a school in a foreign country, okay? People want their kids to go to school. The government does not have money for schools because some crook sitting in the Ministry of Education stole all the money. So you're a missionary, you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're a Mormon, you're whatever. You set up a school in, say, Uganda or Rwanda. People send their kids to these schools. These kids receive a pretty good education. They go on to university. They go into politics. They remember the indoctrination that they received at the Jehovah's Witness school, at the Mormon school, at the Pentecostal school, at the whatever school. All of these Western sects brainwashing my people. And when they're in politics, they pass laws that are detrimental to the queer populations in their countries. So it's a catch-22. You got these Westerners, these reactionary Westerners that call themselves liberals, acting as if Africans and South Asians are inherently homophobic. Yet it came from the West, just like all bad things. We also have the cynical use of queer aesthetic and opportunist queer people to promote corporations and mainstream pride events. You have Coors, Bud Light, Target, North Face, Patagonia. Hell, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, defense contractors, the fucking CIA. They want a message going out that they are progressive, that they are hip, that they are modern. So what do? What is progressive? What is hip? What is modern? Gay people, queer people. So they're going to drag their one gay field agent out from the fucking basement and plaster them all over YouTube. Hey, you want to be valid? You want to serve cunt? Do you want to slay? Why not slay the global south? Or hey, you know what's a good look? You know what's giving liberation? You know what's giving independent gay man? Working for fucking Raytheon and helping to incinerate Yemeni children. So that does exist. Do most queer people know that this is absolute horseshit? Yes. Like, we have this thing. You can divide every group of people into advanced, meaning burn all this shit down, rada, rada, rada. Those are the minority. You have the intermediate, people in the middle, who have some progressive, some backwards views. The intermediate is always the majority of the people, okay? An intermediate queer person would be somebody that would never, ever, ever work for the CIA or the FBI, but they also voted for Hillary because they were afraid of Trump, okay? That's an intermediate person. The left has a nasty habit of driving away the intermediate. That's why it's so tiny and small. And then last, you have the backward. The backward is the queer person who thinks that empowerment is going to go work for the CIA. So what reactionaries do, what left reactionaries do, if there is such a thing, I guess that's what we can call MAGA communists. What pseudo-leftist, that's better, pseudo-leftist, fake leftist, reactionaries posing as communists do is they take the backward and they act as if it's the intermediate. They act as if all queer people are backward. They act as if all queer people want to drone Uganda because they passed a shitty law. But again, that just shows their inability to understand and study and do research. Reactionaries react to things. So, how do we combat pinkwashing? And how do we combat the cynical use of queer aesthetic and opportunist queer people, of which there are many? There are many, but they're not the majority of our community, to promote corporations and mainstream pride events? The answer is always class. Rich queer people, or rich people who happen to be queer, promote their own economic self-interest. Okay, they are members of our community in as much as they can get something from us. If they can't get shit from us, they're gonna throw us under the fucking bus. This happens with rich Black, Latino, Asian, etc. people. People are going to promote their own economic well-being at the expense of the masses from their own national groups and communities. Queer people are not inherently good or bad. We have to look at where this person stands as a class, what their class outlook is. If they are bourgeois, if they're part of the ruling class, they're going to do ruling class shit. If they're proletarian, even if they're proletarian, they may have petty bourgeois. They may want to be middle class. They may want to be ruling class. They may have these aspirations. So we have to focus on and highlight the struggle of homeless trans youth, of working class gay men, lesbian women, non-binary people, all of our community, the majority of our community that works for a living, that does not want to go work for Raytheon or fucking Boeing or Lockheed Martin, that is anti-imperialist or has anti-imperialist leanings. Are they from a colony or a country that has suffered at the hands of U.S. imperialism? If your country has suffered at the hands of U.S. imperialism, turning you into a refugee, you're probably not going to go work for the fucking CIA because you are a good person. You want to serve the people. You don't want to blow the people up. So that's who we should focus on as leftists of whatever stripe. So what pet socks, MAGA communists, reactionaries, what they also do is they use old communist positions on queer people. Communists in the past were extremely iffy on the queer question. And I hate referring to us as a question, my people, but that's how communists talk. We refer to everything as a question. The Negro question, queer question, Palestine question, the indigenous question. I hate it. It treats people as commodities, but what are you going to do? So they constantly rehash these reactionary old positions. For example, as a Maoist, I'm going to refer to the PCP, the Communist Party of Peru, which I have both criticized and defended from unprincipled critique. But this is an article from prisonlegalnews.org, and the PCP was accused of gay persecution because of incidents like this. The Alcayacu massacre. What was the Alcayacu massacre? I've heard of Marca, but I didn't hear about this until recently. It was a selective massacre that occurred on August 6, 1986 in the Peruvian city of Alcayacu, Huánuco. The attack was directed at gay men and sex workers. Those responsible for the attack were members of the Shining Path group, the Partido Comunista del Peru. But usually in common usage, they're just called the Shining Path. And the common bourgeois knowledge is that they were a terrorist group. They were a communist political party. Anyways, The massacre was carried out as part of the social cleansing policies that the group carried out on the Northeast Front. So what is social cleansing? Social cleansing is social group-based killing that consists of the elimination of members of society who are considered undesirable, including but not limited to the homeless, criminals, street children, the elderly, and the disabled. So basically, street eugenics. Context: the PCPSL and the MRTA, Murta Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement, were terrorist organizations of the extreme left, who had initiated a conflict against the Peruvian state in the 1980s. Why did they initiate the conflict? Because Peru in the 80s kind of sucked. They exhibited very hostile behavior towards sectors that were not sympathetic to their ideological positions. What a horribly edited article. Especially state officials. Their hostility was not only limited to their political opponents, they were also against all advances regarding sexual and women's minority rights. Okay, this is bullshit. Like, the PCP had, if I recall correctly, at the lower levels, like the people who were actually popping off, like, if I recall correctly, a lot of them, like maybe even a slight majority, were women. So they're basically portraying it. Now, the Khmer Rouge, the Pol Pot people, the reactionaries, those who shall not be spoken of, like, they were pretty socially conservative. And the PCP was too, but it's just ludicrous to say that they were against all advances regarding sexual and women's minority rights. Anyways, PCP created the Popular Open Committees in the territories it controlled. These committees govern the sexual development of the inhabitants, as well as ensuring the population under their rule did not depart from traditional sexual canons. I'm not even going to cite the TRC. That's basically reactionary bullshit. So anyways, on 6th of August, 86, in the city of Alcayacu, capital of the Jose Crespo y Castillo district, members of the Shining Path kidnapped 10 people, including gay men and female prostitutes. According to the Shining Path, these individuals were social blots. The number of each group and details was not specified. The massacre came to be approved by the population. So, am I going to deny that this happened? Absolutely not. Am I going to say that, yeah, this was probably a shitty thing to do? Yeah, like, you do not just round up people and murder them because of their sexual orientation. That's a shitty thing to do. It makes people hate us. And I think that the rationale, well, I imagine the PCP would do rationing as well. Anyways, the rationale of this was that the masses were socially conservative, and thus they had to represent the will of the masses. And that's a form of right opportunism. Okay? Like, what the masses already know we must do. Like, that's right opportunism. And slaughtering people because of what they are, because they have how they make a living. Like, if you go to the third world, like, prostitution is rampant because the third world, in addition to being a labor source for the first world, it's also a pleasure pit. That's why Castro closed up all the brothels and casinos in Cuba, because he was tired of Yankees coming down and treating his people as trash and entertainment objects. Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, like, all of these countries, this is where rich Westerners go to enjoy themselves. Although if you were a rich Westerner that thought they were going to enjoy themselves in Peru in 1986 with a war on, you might have had something fucky in your head. But anyways, wherever there's massive poverty, like, people are living on less than $1 a day, you're going to have prostitution. So instead of just killing people, as the Shining Path did quite often, they should have investigated the contradictions that led to people being prostitutes. What do you think about people saying that the pride flag is imperialist because the creator was a Vietnam veteran? Though he was never deployed, he was drafted. Those people are idiots. Like, people, things that they don't like, people just slap labels on it. Oh, imperialist. The creator was a Vietnam veteran. Okay. There's at least 1 million Vietnam veterans, if I recall correctly. So are you just going to say that everybody's imperialist now? Like, he still did some benefit, some good to our community. No, he gave us a flag. Flags are important. Flags are Flags are symbols. They unite people. They also polarize people, and they make people feel proud of belonging to a community. So, and he never went to Vietnam. He never fired a gun outside of the range. He never poured napalm on a little kid, or he never slaughtered an entire village. So, like, what? This is the whole discourse around veterans on the left that's irritating. Like, I just don't get it. Like, why don't you go volunteer with unhoused people who are veterans and actually talk to them instead of forming your opinion about a huge group of people? Like, based on what, internet react videos, or what you hear from your other idiot friends on the internet. Like, that's the thing. Like, leftists have to touch grass. We have to actually go out and see and talk to real fucking people. When you do that, you don't have time for all of these silly games. Like, everybody's fucking imperialist now. It's like those third worldist assholes who think that because we were born in the United States that we're net exploiters or some shit like most of this stuff at root, it traces back to you don't know what the fuck to do. You don't know how to get reforms. You don't know how to liberate people. So you just sit on the internet and piss and moan and whine all day. Like, fuck people like that, man. Fuck them all. So, back to the PCP. They responded to allegations that they were persecuting gays. Contreras writes, in the August 92 issue of PLN, Prison Legal News, there appeared a letter by me alleging that the Shining Path Revolutionary Organization in Peru has a practice of killing transsexuals, transvestites, gays, and lesbians in the course of their revolutionary struggle. It was responded to in the same issue by the editors who examined the claims. Other persons have offered comments surrounding this matter. By the reaction, there appears to be a degree of uncertainty among some persons as to the underlying purpose of my letter. Why are communists so fucking long-winded? Like, get to the point. Like, some of us actually work for a living. So, they were accused of engaging in massacres. Apparently, Mirta is implicated as well. Bossio is quoted as saying that the PCP has not made the gays the focus of any attacks and admitted the important role that women play in the PCP leadership, as I mentioned before. He stated that Mirta, Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement, has threatened gays in the areas it controls and has killed at least 7 gays. In further investigating Lofo Flores' claims, I contacted both the PCP and Lucien Chauvin, hell of a name, a gay journalist and activist in Lima. Most important, however, is the PCP's response. I have closely followed the PCP's development and progress over the years and have read virtually all the materials, communiques, and statements, blase, 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 blase. The PCP states, in response to the letter, we have sought articles on the homosexual question written by our teachers, that is to say, Marx, Lenin, and Chairman Mao, and even others, but we have not found any, nor has our party specifically addressed this question in its documents. In general, it appears to us that there is an excessive preoccupation with this subject in certain revolutionary and militant struggles in the U.S., which does not exist in Europe. They are, as we have previously stated, lies and slander which claim that the PCP kills gays for being gay or makes statements against them. In reality, if we examine what Marxism says, the problem is not one of a person's sexual orientation, but rather the class position that they take, as everyone is defined as revolutionary, progressive, democrat, revisionist, or reactionary. Far from making a lengthy analysis here, we can see that homosexuals have existed in all societies, some from birth, others converted. Okay, they're already fucking up. Like, you cannot, as somebody that's been gay for a very long time, like, I did not convert to this shit. And it's not shit, but I did not convert to homosexuality. It's ridiculous to claim that somebody can be, that somebody's sexual orientation can be changed. Converted by the social environment in which they live or have lived. So what? You're becoming gay from osmosis now? Like you catch contact gay? So if I go hang out with some fucking white bread straight people at a country club, am I going to transition to straightness, or does it just work one way? The latter seems extremely influential to us. Our view is that homosexual orientation is not an ideological matter, but one of individual preference. It is possible that the PCP has executed a homosexual, but rest assured that it was not done because of their sexual orientation, but because of their position against the revolution. It is not difficult to see that in the bars and brothels of Peruvian cities frequented by elements of the police and army, some homosexuals work as snitches and collaborators, and because of this they accumulate blood debts with the revolution, so that when the party seizes that city, it will settle accounts with these elements, regardless of the sexual orientation. What then happens is the government and reactionary media report that the party killed gays or cleaned up the city. We reiterate that the PCP does not attack, slander, or discriminate against anyone because of their sexual orientation. In fact, party membership is open to all who support the cause of communist revolution and the principles of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, Gonzalo thought, whatever their sexual preference may be. We believe that there are other more important and crucial topics over which to open major discussions, such as, for example, that of revolutionary violence, which is concretely the universal weapons of the people's war, etc. So, yeah, very dogmatic. But, again, like, you did not have the PCP just going around executing gays. So when Pat Socks and reactionaries bring that up, they obviously haven't done any research. They just heard something offhand and they decided to run with it because they're arguing with a queer person and they want to make you feel bad. Don't let them make you feel bad. Make them feel bad. So, Maoist China. Was there, like, what was it like to be gay in Maoist China? So I found this very interesting article from Kong Wenqing in very small text, and he addresses these questions. What was the government position on homosexuality in Maoist China? Did homosexuals and homosexual activities exist in Maoist China? Were homosexuals killed by the government during the Cultural Revolution? Did the Chinese government simply arrest all homosexuals during the Mao era? Was homosexuality legally criminalized in the People's Republic? Since when was homosexuality pathologized by the medical profession? How and when did the topics of homosexuality and people identified as homosexuals emerge in public discourse? What happened during the process of the decriminalization and depathologization of homosexuality at the turn of the century? And what happened later? So he's already cooking here. Historical and literary writings tend to depict the Mao era, 1949-1976, as sexually repressive. The only legitimate sexual intercourse was that between a man and a woman, within government-sanctioned marriage. Public discussions of homosexuality in the official media were few and far between from the 50s to the 70s, and it seemed impossible for sex between men to exist since government archives are not open. Academic research on homosexuality during the Mao era, personal narratives are a crucially important source for studying this part of Chinese history. So he went around and he actually interviewed people who were queer and who were alive during the Mao era, during the Cultural Revolution, and during the Great Leap Forward, and sometimes even the National War of Liberation. So it's mixed. Like, there was no totalizing. If you are gay, you are going to go to Laogai. We're going to send you up and make you farm rice. But there was also, like, it wasn't like the DDR, like, sexually open. Everybody gets to have fun, fuck in the streets. I think they were fucking in the streets because they were German, not because they were, or called themselves communist. DDR was technically revisionist, but y'all ain't here to hear that. So, what did this researcher find? What I found is that even in the prohibitive environment of socialist China, queer men were still pursuing their sexual desire. Therefore, my argument is that the conventional understanding of socialist China as a period of sexual repression is too simplistic. So, let's see. How did gay men, because this article focuses almost exclusively on gay men, pedo shit. A male nurse in his 20s from the hospital initiated him into male-to-male sex, including anal intercourse at the age of 10. The two later became sworn brothers along with several other young men, and as Bai remembers, the brothers treated him very well. He was good looking and popular in his junior high school. So, you had a bit of gross, sick, disgusting pederasty. But um hmm. Like most queer men I interviewed, Bai did not consider same-sex relations with men and heterosexual marriage mutually exclusive. Back in his younger days, marriage was a rite of passage for every man. He married a woman at 59 at the age of 26, which was considered quite late at that time, but his career came to an abrupt end in the following year. His first son was born in 1960, and he asked for a few days off to stay at home, was later fired for unapproved absence. Bai insisted that his homosexuality was not the reason he lost his job. Rather, he was criticized for his bourgeois lifestyle for the time he spent on eating, clothing, and playing. He refused to admit his mistakes and talked back to his superior. The consequences of losing his job would be shown later in his life, but at the time, he did not seem to care as much. His attitude seems to suggest that the system that was called the Iron Rice Bowl was still not fully established in the early 60s, and jobs were therefore not yet as stable as in later years. So, you basically have this guy. He's going around. He's married. He has a wife. And he has a kid. And he's going out, engaging in queer activities. So that's pretty common. People, that's how people that live in societies that are traditional, that are socially conservative, um, tend to be. Like, they have a beard. That's what you call when a queer person. I mean, you can also be quite bisexual, but if you marry a person of the opposite sex because you're made to, or because you don't want to appear out, then that's called a beard. So I don't know if this guy had a beard or not, but or if he was just bi, but yeah, it's pretty common. They did the same thing in Hollywood. So he just goes on and talks about how life was, and by and large, it was pretty normal. Like, there was no massive repression of queer people during the GPCR, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. That is the article, if anybody's interested in reading it. Um, so yeah, I really like this article. Like, I have a book that's basically a collection. It's called Words Met the Grassroots, and in like the first account, it talks about how this gay guy during the Cultural Revolution was forced to self-criticize for, and I quote, touching the genitals of other comrades. Ooh. So, kind of a mixed bag, depending on where you were and who you were engaging with and what you were doing. So, basically, Pat sucks and MAGA communists don't know history and they're full of shit when they try to bring up repression of queer people in past socialist societies. Even if such repression did exist, and I'm not going to say that it didn't because I'm not a fucking liar, but even if such repression did exist, we should not defend it. Like, we are not obliged as revolutionaries, as leftists, to defend everything that every past experiment or system did, okay? Like, that's lying to the masses. That's lying to ourselves. Like, massacres, incarcerating people for their sexual orientation, incarcerating people because they're trans. That's reactionary shit. And we are not obliged to defend these things. As a matter of fact, we are obliged to criticize these things. So, there is no such thing, just as an aside, there is no such thing as a patriotic socialist in the imperial core. These people are con artists, they're hacks, and they're fascists attempting to smuggle their Duganite trash into the revolutionary movement. Their job is to try to confuse misguided and younger comrades and bring them over to the dark side, the side of reaction. They are effectively siding with fascists and promoting rhetoric and even actions that hurt queer people, especially trans people. So we are not obliged to treat them in a principled manner. And like I've already said, many supposed leftists and all crypto fascists lean on reactionary views expressed by previous thinkers. For example, Maxim Gorky, I've seen this going around, famous Soviet writer, said that if you exterminate all homosexuals, fascism will disappear. So they latch on to this quote and see, like, see, base Soviet man said communism bad. And I'm like, what? I'm like, bruh. Like, okay. Said a lot of stupid things. Sorry about that. Fucking cat. Anyways, we're not dogmatists. We're not reactionaries. All revolutionaries did and said reactionary shit at some point. So even if our past experiments were socially conservative or even did reactionary things, those are elements that we should abandon. Those are elements that we should criticize or place in the context of their country and time, not elements that we should seek to recreate. So let's talk a little bit about how American leftists have treated queer people. So as a Maoist, I'm going to focus on the position paper of the Revolutionary Union on homosexuality and gay liberation. This is sort of a meme at this point. So the following is the RU. This was from the Los Angeles Research Group. Hold on, I will be right back. Sorry about that. I put the cat out the room. So they engage in stock Maoist bullshit. Ruling class attempts to hold back, blah, 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 maintain wealth and power, blah, blah. Shit I already know. So, homosexuality is a response, consciously or not, to a male supremacist society. But because it is a response to oppressive institutions and oppressive relationships, it is not necessarily a progressive response and one that challenges the power of the monopoly capitalist. What the fuck does that like? See, this is why when you write on queer people, or when you write about queer people, it's best to have people that are actually queer write these things. Like the RCP, especially at this stage, was in like a sort of macho man mode. Like we're the biggest, baddest, biggest swinging dick revolutionaries in the fucking game. So it's obvious it bleeds over into their texts. As our relationships become unstable, people, particularly the petty bourgeoisie, which has more leisure time, scramble about in a desperate attempt to find some meaning in their lives. Today, people are grasping at all kinds of straws at exotic religious sects, mysticism, drugs, promiscuity, pornography, sex orgies, Trotskyism, etc. People move to rural communes because they feel totally alienated from capitalist society, especially in decaying urban centers. We can understand where such a response comes from, but we therefore don't call it progressive. A response, a movement, a struggle is progressive if it moves the struggle of the working class forward. If it doesn't, it is not progressive. Okay, this is just a fuck. It's already like they're already fucking. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do sex orgies have to do with Trotskyism? I don't think Trotskyites have much sex. No offense to any genuine Trotsky readings. Homosexuality is an individual response to male supremacy and male chauvinism. It is a response which turns its back to the struggle between men and women. Homosexuality is not a response Homosexuality is a sexual orientation. Like they're echoing the PCP here, saying that saying that this is something that can be conditioned into somebody. And no, 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 no. Jesus Christ. These are women. Oh, they're talking about lesbians now. Many people, especially women, have become homosexuals as a matter of choice, usually after some involvement in the women's movement. These are women who said that they couldn't or wouldn't deal with men in their personal relationships. Such a choice is clearly individualist. It says, I have a right to relate the way I want to. I can do what I want with my body. Okay, there is nothing wrong about saying that you can relate to people in your personal sexual life as you want to. You can do what you want with your body. That is true. Like, what is the deal here? How is this bourgeois? Like this is what happens, first of all, when you're rooted in dogmatism. This is what happens, second of all, when you do not frequently interact with queer people. The only queer people you know are in the closet, because the so-called organization that you've created is reactionary garbage and trash. Let's see how much of this garbage I can take. As a rule, homosexual relationships in our society are extremely difficult, require a lot of time to make work, if they work at all. They involve a great deal more cultivation than do heterosexual relationships. And one thing I'm glad about living in the year 2023, like, I have a lot of critiques of cancel culture, mainly because it's undialectical. It thinks that it's basically similar to the reactionary Red Guards during the reactionary aspects of the Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution, who said that, like, if your dad was a landlord, then you're going to be a landlord. It doesn't matter how much you contribute to the cause of the proletariat. Like, cancel culture is basically like that. It's saying that no matter what you have done for the people nowadays, like, if you said a mean word years ago, then you're still going to be a reactionary today. Like, but one thing that I'm really, really glad about, aspect of cancel culture that I really, really like, is the fact that garbage like this uh would never fly today. Like, look at this. Homosexual relationships involve a great deal more cultivation than do heterosexual relations. Like, why are these people even writing about this stuff? Like, how does this improve the struggle for socialism in our society? And this shit is so long. Like, while gay people can be anti-imperialists, we feel they cannot be communists. Well, news to me. To be a communist, we must accept and welcome struggle in all facets of our lives, personal as well as political. We cannot struggle with male supremacy in the factory and not struggle at home. We feel the best way to struggle out such contradictions in our personal lives is in stable, monogamous relationships between men and women based on mutual love and respect. Because homosexuals do not carry the struggle between men and women into their most intimate relationships, they are not prepared, in principle, for the arduous task of class transformation. Because homosexual relationships require so much time, we have found that homosexuals have had an extremely different time meeting the strenuous requirements of a communist organization, also known as a cult, and they have often put unnecessary burdens on their comrades. And blah, 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 blah. Our position can be summarized in 3 main points. Homosexuality in the USA today is an individual response to the intensification of the contradictions brought about by decaying imperialism, blah, 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 blah. Because homosexuality is based on petty bourgeois ideology and deals with the contradiction between men and women by turning its back to it. Homosexuals cannot be communists. That is, belong to communist organizations where people are committed to struggle against all forms of individualism in all aspects of their lives. Point 3. Gay liberation is putting forth gayness as a strategy for revolution in this country as a reactionary ideology. It only leads down the road of demoralization and defeat. Okay, so let's look at the gay movement versus the RCP in the 80s. The gay movement, of which the vanguard was ACT UP. I'm going to watch a documentary about them Saturday on stream. You should join me. The gay movement actually extracted concessions from the ruling class, okay? They got the price of AIDS medication lowered. They literally occupied Wall Street like they stormed the New York Stock Exchange. They had a very developed research bureau in ACT UP. And the RCP, through its stupidity, waned and waned and waned, and until it turned into the insipid cult that we all know and love today. So, were I around back then, I would probably be more inclined to join ACT UP instead of fucking this fucking trash. There is a very good takedown that was released as well. In response to this, it basically picks it apart piece by piece. There's a link right there. So how do communists engage with people? As always, the National Democratic Front of the Philippines sets the vanguard, sets the standard. The revolution has no gender. Rico, a choreographer, related that their Ninunong Bakla and Anitong Baring, literally gay ancestors and gay icons in the urban centers, experienced discrimination from some members of the movement who considered homosexuality a weakness. The gays were criticized for their flipping fingers and swaying hips, especially during rallies. There was even a time when being gay was considered a security risk. The growing number of gays and lesbians in the party necessitated thorough studies, ideological remolding, and a policy guide for the proper attitude towards members who have expressed their sexual preference. Said efforts are aimed at mitigating, if not altogether effacing, gender discrimination. Among these was Armed Proletarian Relationship of the Sexes, OPRS, a party document to guide relationships and marriages. During the 10th plenum of the Communist Party of the Philippines, they included the gays and lesbians' equal rights and accorded recognition of their sexual preferences as well as the relationships and marriages they opt to enter into. Although, also, in due time, the gays have proven their work. That the flipping of their fingers and the swaying of their hips have nothing to do with their ability to lead and carry out tasks, including military tasks. However, the process of acceptance and recognition of the rights of non-straight members has not been easy. Aside from the unequal development of members in the movement, the influence of the bourgeois culture in society that looks down and discriminates on LGBT people is strong. So here we have the National Democratic Front of the Philippines telling us that looking down on queer people, or even like doing what our MAGA communists and reactionaries do, that's bourgeois behavior. That's not proletarian behavior. That's tailist, rightist, bourgeois behavior. So, Padude mentions that somebody told him that gays have no place in the revolution. Severely offended, he got demoralized. He left the movement, but there was something at home. He couldn't do anything but cry. After a few months, he sent word that he will return and assess. Padude, Pa is Filipino for comrade, by the way, believed that combating the debased culture of this bourgeois society we are born into and initiating change would fruit from the collective struggle of the gays, lesbians, and straights in the National Democratic Revolution. Party documents are available to enlighten gays and lesbians that they are not divorced from the oppression and exploitation suffered by other genders. Thus, it is important that they take an active role in the people's revolution. So this is what our reactionaries don't understand. Like, why would you willfully antagonize and drive away and irritate and even support harming people who can be your comrades? Learn from the Filipinos. And this is just a continued account of revolutionaries who were queer and who work in the Maoist movement in the Philippines. The revolution does not discriminate on gender. The gun has no gender. The aspiration to serve the masses and win the revolution and institute real societal change binds us all, men, women, gays, and lesbians. It is only proper for all gays and lesbians to join the revolutionary movement. It is only through armed revolution that we can promote and build a society in which beauty is not only at the surface but also emanates from the core of complete freedom. So this is a real communist position on queer issues. It's not moralizing, it's not judging, it's not trying to impose ridiculous restrictions on the rights of the people. It's acknowledging us as we are, and it's encouraging us to join the ranks of the revolution, and it's giving us pride of place. So this is the perfect segue into a discussion on like why is there a pretty substantial amount of queerphobia in the Black community. And Huey P. Newton, the macho of machos, wrote this very, very good article in 1970. Well, it was actually a speech. So, he said, during the past few years, strong movements have developed among women and among homosexuals seeking their liberation. There's been some uncertainty about how to relate to these movements. Whatever your personal opinions and your insecurities about homosexuality and the various liberation movements among homosexuals and women, I speak of homosexuals and women as oppressed groups. Keep in mind, this was released in 1970. Like, the BPP was the vanguard on this issue, especially if we compare it to that rightist trash released by the RCP. We should try to unite with them in a revolutionary fashion. I say whatever your insecurities are, because as we very well know, sometimes our first instinct is to want to hit a homosexual in the mouth and want a woman to be quiet. We want to hit a homosexual in the mouth because we are afraid that we might be homosexual. We want to hit the woman or shut her up because we are afraid that she might castrate us or take the nuts we might not have to start with. We must gain security in ourselves and therefore have respect and feelings for all oppressed people. We must not use the racist attitude that the white racists use against our people because they are black and poor. Many times, the poorest white person is the most racist because he is afraid he might lose something or discover something he does not have. So you're some kind of a threat to him. I do not remember ever constituting any value that said a revolutionary must say offensive things towards homosexuals, or that a revolutionary should make sure that women do not speak out about their own particular kind of oppression. As a matter of fact, it is just the opposite. We say that we recognize the woman's right to be free. We have not said much about the homosexual at all, but we must relate to the homosexual movement because it is a real thing. I know through reading and through my life experience and observation that homosexuals are not given freedom and liberty by anyone in this society. They might be the most oppressed people in this society. And what made them homosexual? Perhaps it's a phenomenon that I don't understand entirely. Some people say that it is the decadence of capitalism. I don't know if that is the case. I rather doubt it. Whatever the case is, we know that homosexuality is a fact that exists, and we must understand it in its purest form. That is, a person should have the freedom to use his body in whatever way he wants. This is not endorsing things in homosexuality that we wouldn't view as revolutionary, but there is nothing to say that a homosexual cannot also be a revolutionary. Maybe now I'm injecting some of my prejudice by saying that even a homosexual can be a revolutionary. Quite the contrary, maybe a homosexual could be the most revolutionary. And I'm linking all of these articles in my chat that you all, you terminally online vagabonds and ne'er-do-wells, can read them. So you have Huey P. Newton, who at this time was also developing his theory of intercommunalism, saying that that gay people can be revolutionary, and echoing what the Communist Party of the Philippines will later release and make an issue of line, which is that we don't have any business dumping on queer people. They're people just like anybody else. They're either bourgeois, petty bourgeois, proletarian, or lumpen. They should be organized, and they should be armed with Marxist-Leninist Maoist theory. That's watching. So why is it that there's like a lot of queerphobia in the New African community, especially among men? I think first you have historical context, okay? Like a lot of black men aspire to that nuclear family ideal that we were not allowed to have that during slavery, okay? They broke apart, they destroyed our families, they sold away our dads, our uncles, our grandpas, our male relatives. So we ended up becoming sort of by default a matriarchal society. We were raised by auntie, grandma, big mama, etc. And that was the historical context which led to the development of the new African family structure. I actually had a conversation with my coworker yesterday about this, and he mentioned the fact that welfare helped to break up black family. And he, not a fact, it's a thesis, but he basically stated that the white man, my coworker, he's sort of he identifies as economically left, but socially conservative. And he basically said that the welfare system developed by the white man castrated the black male because it gave women economic power and it turned the government into a sugar daddy. Obviously, I'm not in agreement with that. Um, but that type of thinking is very prevalent in our communities among our proletarian masses, especially men. And you also have to consider the role of the church and in many instances the mosque. Okay? We all love Malcolm X, but the Nation of Islam is a socially conservative institution, okay? Like this is not a revolutionary libertine organization. Like if you go to the mosque, you see that they have men and women separate. Um and a variety of other things. They support petty bourgeoisification of the black community. They want every black person to have a small business or work in their small businesses. So this is not a revolutionary organization. Never mind, you have these Southern Baptist churches, you got the CMEs, AMEs, Pentecostals. Like these are not socially progressive institutions. But these are the churches in which we are raised and in which we are socialized, okay? So those are the two main reasons. It's resentment from it. Like if we among proletarian men of any race, if you're queer, you tend to be seen as less of a man if you are male coded or male presenting. And then second of all, you're seen as, oh, this motherfucker, he don't want to have no family. He don't want to spread his seed around. He don't want to have no kids. So he's a punk. He's not a man. And then like it's just bourgeois machismo. And black people are singled out for particular ire from certain wings of the progressive movement as being homophobes and transphobes because we still live in a racist society and black people are singled out and blamed for every fucking thing. But is the black community any more or any less trans or queerphobic than any other group that's majority proletarian and lumpen? No. So that's my take on the whole thing. Now, how can we combat it? Through political education. Because when you look at the political education that we have now, these are the types of dudes that people like my co-worker are listening to. This is Dr. Umar. I'll be back in like 5 minutes. I need a smoke break, but after this, I'm going to take apart Dr. Umar's trash. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. So I'm back after indulging my bad habit. If you smoke cigarettes, I encourage you to quit. If you don't smoke cigarettes, I encourage you to never start. It's a bad thing. Shortens your life by 10 years. I'm an idiot. So, Dr. Umar. Let's see what this jabroni has to say. I've actually never watched one of his videos for an extended period of time. So I guess this is a struggle session for me.
And media are public school and media are telling our kids to be gay or get a sex change.
I'm a product of the American public school system. I was never told to be gay or get a sex change. So he's already fucked up. And this torture has only lasted for 4 seconds.
That's their recipe for love. Okay? Get a sex change or find somebody of the same gender. And then they look at us, the heterosexuals, and they're like, the heterosexuals can't get along. So if the black heterosexuals can't get along, maybe what the government is telling me is what I should do. Maybe what my teacher is telling me in the classroom is what I should do. And I would argue that we are doing a better job of turning black boys and girls against traditional black love.
Okay, so this guy markets himself as someone that is very keen on promoting the study of black history and African history. He calls himself a Pan-African. I don't think he's read a word of Kwame Nkrumah or Garvey or anybody of that nature. This guy is not a Pan-African. And this guy obviously has not studied much African history, because if he knew African history and if he had a working knowledge of anthropology of Africans, he would know that queerness is something that has existed in every African nation and ethnic group, from the Yoruba to the Zulu to the Egyptians to the fucking Ethiopians. Like, queerness has existed in every single pre-colonial society. And what a lot of reactionaries will say is that, what a lot of black reactionaries will say is that this was something that was introduced to us by the white man. No, the white man gave us the Bible, bruh. He gave us his twisted, warped, fucked up version of the Bible. And that made us hate ourselves. That made us hate traditional expressions of black queerness. And it separated us from our heritage. That's what the white man did. The white man did not introduce us to homosexuality.
Than even mainstream media in public school is doing with this back and forth fighting.
I have to say something. I had a textification. I don't mean a conversation, but a textification today online with this person. They were saying that people should boycott the Roots Music Festival coming to Philadelphia because it has Dave Chappelle and a couple of other people on there that had supposedly had said some unkind words about gays. And it was a black person, and they were saying, so I just felt compelled. I said, look, it's really interesting that you find it appropriate to tell people to boycott, black performers because they said something that you didn't like about, because they were being said something maybe anti-gay. But I don't see you saying boycott people that are being anti-black.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is another thing that is frequently done. Like, they try to set queer people and black people against each other as if one cannot be both queer and black. And that really irritates me, because it's just, it's undialectical. Like, you do not have to choose. You could be both. Well, many people, including myself, are both. And someone told me once that they are under the impression that queer people are hijacking the black movement. I'm like, how have we hijacked the black movement? Like, have there been unprincipled settler queer people that have made some havoc in black liberation movement? Sure. But you also have to consider the example of James Baldwin and many other unnamed activists who were gay, who were lesbian, who were trans, Marsha P. Johnson, who were both proudly black and proudly queer, and who contributed much to the development of the liberation movements of both. So there is no struggle between queer people as queer people and black people as black people. That is a false reactionary thing you're setting up. And anybody that tries to create division among two oppressed groups, you have to investigate that very closely and see what their angle is. Because usually that angle is counter-revolutionary and reactionary. It's fascist even.
Absolutely. And that right there is a trend, Baba David, that was given birth to by President Barack Hussein Obama. It was Barack Obama who deliberately took the spotlight off of black people issues and anti-black hate and put it on LGBTQ issues and LGBT hate. He did that. And, you know, when black people, I see a lot of us now waking up and recognizing that supporting all of these other so-called marginal groups and organizations, a lot of us are starting to wake up and realize this is just a trap. It's a distraction.
How is it a trap and a distraction for marginalized groups to unite? Now, I'm not saying that there is not a lot more that the queer movement can do to combat anti-blackness. But, like, just to say that the very principle of uniting amongst oppressed groups is a trap or a distraction, that's bunk. That's absolutely riskless behavior.
To get black people to stop worrying about what matters most to black people. And because we are so multicultural, which grows out of our collective self-hatred, black people are always ever ready and willing to lend a hand to somebody else's cause. But none of these other groups ever lend a hand to our cause. Most LGBTQs are anti-black.
Okay, like where is he getting this from? Like, most LGBT, I want to see statistics, okay? Like, most queer people in this country actually would be identified as progressive. Like, do white people in the United States have anti-blackness in them? Yes, all of them do. But that is because they are settlers. And settlers are inherently anti-black. Now, many settlers are also queer. Their anti-blackness has to do with them being settlers, with them being part of a nation which has profited at the expense of black people and which has an ideological apparatus that is inherently anti-black. They were brainwashed into anti-blackness. It has nothing to do with them being queer. This is a false, shitty thing to say. And it's a dangerous thing to say because rhetoric like this triggers violence. It contributes to violence.
They are just as racist as any other white person.
I said that. I said that today to him. I said, you know, it seems to me like this person is more proud of being gay than he is of being black. I said, because certainly there's racism within the gay community. Why don't you point out some of those things that we should be boycotting with that?
Hey, the black homosexuals know that they are an afterthought in the LGBT movement agenda. In fact, black homosexuals and lesbians are to the LGBTQ movement what black people are to the Democratic Party. It is the same relationship. You are an afterthought. We don't care about you, okay? And the only time we call on you is when we need to use you for something. That's the only reason that they call on them. And I also believe that it is an absolute contradiction to call LGBTQs a minority group. I still need somebody to help me understand how can being white and gay or white and trans make you a minority group. If you are a privileged white male in America,
Still got
This man needs to do some like study of intersectionality. Like you can be part of the part of a majority, but you can also be part of an oppressed group. Like queer people are a minority in the United States. White people are a majority in the United States, yes, but a white trans person is still at an increased risk of being murdered horribly, or not being able to get a job, or being fired from their job, or having a bunch of other horrible things happen to them because they're trans. So there's always a primary, secondary, tertiary contradiction. For white trans people or white queer people, their whiteness is a contradiction, but their transness is an antagonistic contradiction with the rest of settler society. I mean, look at how other white people treat them. They treat them like shit, like trash. They're killing them, expelling them from their jobs. Like they're passing laws to hurt these people, and you're sitting here acting like they have fucking like they're fucking privileged above a cisgender heteronormative individual of any race. That's bunk. Absolutely riskless. Like, well, apparently this guy actually is a real doctor. He's not an MD, but he has I think it's in psychology. Maybe that's why he's so fucking nutters.
got some privileges.
Gay take away your privilege. It doesn't. It doesn't. If you are a white woman in America, being a lesbian does not take away your privilege. And because we know that the LGBTQ movement, like the women's rights movement, was financed, funded, and operated by the CIA and the FBI, these are government.
Okay, so this is actually saw Pat Sook, a MAGA communist, saying this the other day. While it's true, like this is like saying Black Lives Matter, the entire movement, everybody that has ever put the 3 letters in their Twitter bio or on their Facebook profile, it's like saying that they're all working for the government. Yes, people like Gloria Steinem and like opportunist queer people, opportunist gay, white, upper middle class men. Yes, they receive funding and directives from the US government. Like there's gay people that work for the CIA, but to characterize the entire movement as being somehow CIA funded just because the CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, all of these types of groups, funded organizations are allowed, and they have professional slick videos, and they do campaigns every year because that's what they're paid to do, acting like they're representative of the trans kid on the street sleeping under an overpass with a pistol in their backpack to stop them from being robbed or worse. Like that's just foolish. These are not serious people.
Government-funded group. How can they be a minority?
With the objective of breaking up the family.
With the objective of breaking up the family. In fact, one of the reasons why the CIA, well, we know why the FBI funded the LGBT.
Again, bro, you're making all of these statements without any any backup. Like, why would the FBI fund the radical queer movement? Matter of fact, the FBI spied on and harassed queer organizers and activists. So they're going to turn around and give us money now? Like, where are you getting, like, where are you pulling this from? Show me an FBI document, a CIA document that can be directly tied, that offers proof of state agencies funding a radical queer group. Now, did they do COINTELPRO? Did they infiltrate radical queer groups to try to stir the pot? Sure. They did that to the left. They did that to the women's movement. They did that to everybody. But this, I just don't see it, man. Like, where are you getting this from? Where's your proof? You're a doctor. I know you had to write a doctoral thesis. Like, did you just make all of these sorts of wild accusations and claims when you wrote your dissertation and when you wrote your thesis? I know you didn't, because you wouldn't have been allowed to have a doctorate unless you pulled it out of a fucking Cracker Jack box or an unaccredited university. Like, come on, man.
The movement, that was the eclipse, the Black Civil Rights Movement in the aftermath of Dr. King's murder. That's why those gay riots that took place, the Stonewall riots, they only come, maybe 2 years after Dr. King's murder. It was not a long time. So they didn't hesitate to make sure they blocked out the black agenda.
Okay. First of all, those gay riots, as you call them, the Stonewall uprising, that was because the police were beating the shit out of working class, trans, queer, gay, and lesbian people. Okay? That was not a plot to block out the black movement. Many of those people there were black. Martha Johnson was black. Sylvia Rivera was Puerto Rican. Like, no. Like, I'm worried about you, bro. I don't get it. Like, these were not rich white men. These were street kids, black and brown people, working class people, sex workers, the lumpen proletariat and the semi-proletariat, the working class. And you're saying that there was somehow a plot to blot out the black movement. Like, that's not how movements work.
With the gay agenda. So that's why they gave birth to the gay agenda, to suffocate the black agenda. And then the reason they gave birth to the woman's right agenda was to get the women out the home. Three main reasons why they created the women's rights movement. Number one, get women out the home because they needed more workers. American capitalism, the corporations, the businesses, they were running out of labor, and they didn't want to bring the Mexicans in. So they said, if we're running out of labor, what are we going to do to get more workers? They said, we got to put the women to work. But what we're going to do is we're going to propagandize this.
This guy knows nothing about women's history. Like, women have always worked. Poor women have always worked. The Triangle fucking Shirtwaist Fire in 1912, you had hundreds of immigrant women, Irish, Italian, Jewish. They were locked into a fucking factory and they burned to death. Like, women have always worked, and women have been at the forefront of the labor movement. Now, middle-class bourgeois women, no, they rarely worked. But, like, he has no class analysis whatsoever. Like, under fucking slavery, women worked. Like, were these women pampered, sitting in the fucking cabin, waiting for master to come? And, like, bruh. Like, how are you a doctor? Like, who gave you your doctorate? You have no understanding of labor history. You have no understanding of how the CIA and FBI work. You have no understanding of queer people. You have no understanding of anything.
To make it look like the woman is being oppressed. Not to say she's not, but they didn't care about that. Their agenda was not helping women escape chauvinism. Their agenda was being able to exploit the labor of women for capitalism. So they painted this nice rosy picture to women that you have a right to work, you have a right to a career, you have a right to the pursuit of anything you want, just like your man does. And they pay no attention to what would happen to the children once the women got out the house. And Baba David, it's no coincidence that social media sprang up right after they got the women out the house. All this was organized. This was a collective, systemic war to get the women out of the home so the government could control the minds of the children. So when you look at the world today, not only America, not only Black America, but when you look at the world today, the husband is pursuing his dreams, the wife is pursuing her dreams, and the children are at home all day long after school on social media being indoctrinated and brainwashed. That is exactly how the power structure wanted it. Think about this for a minute, Baba David.
Okay, so this man, he has a doctorate in psychology or psychiatry, something working with the mind. How do you not know how people are indoctrinated and brainwashed? Like, back in the day, 50s, 60s, you still have this nuclear family, mama at home. Who do you think was doing the indoctrination and brainwashing? Indoctrination and brainwashing comes through church, television. Like, the only way that you can stop somebody from being indoctrinated and brainwashed in capitalist society is to send them to a cabin on a mountain somewhere and break off all contact with the outside world. Like, there was still brainwashing and indoctrination going on. And on social media, it's not all progressive indoctrination, okay? You have these kids that coming out being fascists, Nazis, MAGA socialists. Like, what you're doing now, man, Dr. Umar, is fucking, that's indoctrination and brainwashing people into reactionary shit. You're teaching people, gullible people, people who have things going wrong in their lives, who don't know any better. You're teaching them how to be reactionary because you have doctor before your name. People respect titles. Again, indoctrination. You have doctor before your name and you're spouting this shit with no proof, no evidence whatsoever. Yet you have this smug demeanor about yourself that convinces people of the validity of what you're saying. You're engaging in indoctrination and reactionary propaganda.
If they didn't get the woman out the house, so the first purpose of the women's movement was to get the women working. They needed their labor. They needed to exploit their labor, and they had to make it look good for the women. So that's number one. We need y'all to work because we're running out of workers. That's number one. They also wanted to be able to tax the women as well so they can use that revenue for other things. So it was about turning the woman into a slave wage earner. It was not about her liberation. Number two, to get the woman away from the child. Because the woman, the mother, was always the guard dog. You know, she was the protector. I take that guard dog. Not a good.
First line of defense, right?
Yeah, she was always the protector. You had to get through the mother to get through the child, as you do with any living organism. The mother often protects while the father is out hunting and earning a living.
That's right.
Right. So they had to get the mother away.
This man has never hunted or killed an animal in his life. This is another thing with reactionaries. Men's rights activists of all races, like, they have this idealization of a idyllic past where the man went out and killed his food with his bare hands and the women worked of the soil. And I'm like, bruh, you would not have made it under slavery, or you would not have made it back home in Africa. Like, you being able to ramble down a microphone to millions of idiots, that is the product of the society that you despise. Like, you literally make your living by brainwashing and indoctrinating fools on the internet. I'm going to watch about 10 more minutes of this shit because I don't think I can take it.
Away from the child so they could indoctrinate the child. And then the third reason for the women's live movement in the Black community in particular was to turn the Black woman against the Black man, to make the Black man economically, socially, politically irrelevant to the Black community as a whole, but to Black women in particular. And they have succeeded. Even right now, when you look at all the back and forth going on between Black men and Black women, all of this, Baba David, are the aftershock of this woman empowerment movement. And our children are suffering as a result of it. I'm not saying women shouldn't work. I believe women got a right to a career, to a business, hold public office, to be a clergy person in the church. I have no issue with a woman in leadership at all. I can serve with a woman in leadership. I can serve over a woman in leadership. I can serve under a woman in leadership. I don't have an issue. But with that being said, we have to balance this out so the children always have an adult at home. So if the man is going to work for 5 years and the woman going to work for 5 years, or y'all going to do a year and year, or somebody going to run a business from home,
like, do you understand the life of the average working class person? Like, what do you mean work off and on for 5 years and then somebody else works for 5? Like, shit don't work that way, man. Both have to work because inflation. Wages do not match inflation. Shit is becoming more expensive. Your kids want to go to college. You got a car, mortgage payment, interest on mortgage payment. Like, this is not, like, are you going to give people money to live this little fantasy you've cooked up in your brain? Because that's the only way it's working. Like, what you're talking, it's bullshit. You have this petty bourgeois view of the world, and it's totally at odds with the lifestyle of the average working class American, man.
Somebody needs to be home with these children, because guess what, Baba David? But with that as it is, Baba David, this never happened. This never happened if you never get the women out the house. There's no way they would be able to indoctrinate the children like this if you never get the women out the house. And the second thing I'm going to...
All right, so he's saying that trans children are indoctrinated. My question is this, and they always bring this up. Like, they love to say that you can be indoctrinated into being gay. You can be indoctrinated into being trans. So if gay and trans people, if queer people have always existed throughout history, as historical research has shown us, and 500 years ago, being gay or queer or trans, in Europe at least, got you labeled a witch or something even worse, a sodomite, and burned at the stake or tortured in a horrible way, having a red hot poker rammed up your ass or something. Why would you willingly, if sexuality is like a light switch you can cut on or off, and why would you willingly, in a society where the punishment for this is death most foul, why would you willingly choose to do that? Like, most people don't have a death wish. So that kind of puts the lie to this little assertion that it's all in your head. Like, no, it's not in your head. Trans people have always existed. Queer people have always existed. Like, even in situations, like, there's still places on this earth today where you can go and being queer will get you stoned to death or beheaded or hung. Yet queer people still exist in those places. Most of them end up leaving, thankfully. But, like, check out Chechnya. There's gays in Chechnya, a place where that's punishable by death. These people are just, they're delusional. They don't research. They don't study. Yet they claim, because they have some bullshit title before their name, to know what they're talking about. And they indoctrinate and brainwash people into stupidity.
Say, there would never be able to push childhood transgenderism on our children if we ever gave up our independent black schools. Two big mistakes we made as a people. We gave up our independent black schools, and we allowed...
What independent black schools? Like, are you referring to segregated Jim Crow schools? Those were not very good schools. You want us to go back to segregation and Jim Crow?
No parent to be at home. I don't want to say the woman had to work. It could have been the woman who needed to work and the man who needed to stay home. But removing both parents from the home was a big mistake that Black America is suffering from.
But I would say that, you know, when they threw us in the dirt, they got dirty too, because their families are breaking up as well. You know, their women have become what they wanted to so-called independent and not needing their own man and run around with less morals themselves. It ain't like it's just black women.
Alright, I can only take so much of this shit, but people like this have a pretty substantial following in the new African community. They market themselves as life coaches, um, family, like family guides and therapists and shit. Like, these people are not qualified. They're not up to date on the latest research. They're reactionaries, defrauding uh, people who really don't know any better. That's why political education within the new African community is so important. So, to wrap this stream up, queerphobia on the left is attributable to 1, dogmatism, 2, fascists that have insinuated themselves into our movements that we allowed to happen, because many leftists are good people, principled people who want to relate to everybody in a principled way, but you cannot do that with bad actors and with unprincipled people. So that's the first one. Then you have dogmatism, which relies on a mythologized view of our past. Even if this mythologized view of queer people being suppressed and oppressed existed, we would not support that, because communists come to free the people. And when you read Huey, when you read the Filipino communists, and when you contrast them to the RCP and the Revolutionary Union, you see that organizations that are actually among the people, that have a mass base and roots in the people, love the people, including queer people. Queerphobia in the black community could be attributed to idiots like Dr. Umar, religion, and a misguided view of the history of black queerness. They think that is something that was introduced to us by the white man. This is not the case. We've always been queer. As a matter of fact, you can even go further and say that blackness is queer. Queer means strange. Blackness has always been seen as being strange. So, right was a riot. Don't buy Bud Light. I live in a city that makes it. It's horrible beer. I prefer Guinness. Don't be a reactionary. Don't argue with or encourage reactionaries. If you see a MAGA socialist or a Pat Salk or any of these other grifters and scammers, laugh at them. Don't try to debate them, because they're not coming from a point where they're seeking unity. They seek division, and they seek chaos. Oh, hello. Maria Roja 17. Oh, my Spanish is shit. Anyways, I gotta cut out of here. Hope y'all enjoyed it. I will see y'all tomorrow, where we're gonna be watching United in Anger.